We're going to crash. The flight attendant's voice shook as she begged passengers for help. Nobody answered. Nobody except the small girl in 27F who stood up and said 5 impossible words, "I can fly this plane." She was 16. Unlicensed. Illegal. And she was their only chance. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The Boeing 777 climbed through the night sky over Dubai, engines roaring as it pushed toward cruising altitude. Inside the cabin, overhead bins clicked shut. Passengers settled into their seats. Flight attendants walked the aisles, checking seatbelts. In seat 27F, Mira Castellanos stared at her hands. They were small hands. 16-year-old hands. Hands that didn't look like they could do anything important. Nobody on this plane knew what these hands could do. The businessman in 27E opened his laptop. The elderly woman in 27G smiled at Mira. "Traveling alone, dear?" "Yes, ma'am," Mira said quietly. "So brave. When I was your age, I never would have flown by myself." Mira just nodded. She wasn't brave. She was broken. 4 years ago today, her parents died in a plane crash. Captain Elena Castellanos and Major David Castellanos. Test pilots. The best of the best. They'd taught Mira everything about flying before she was even 10 years old. Her first word was flaps. Her first toy was a Model F-16. She grew up in cockpits and hangars, learning to love the sky the way other kids loved playgrounds. Then one day, when she was 12, her parents went up to test a new aircraft design. Something went wrong at 15,000 feet. They ejected, but their parachutes failed. Both dead on impact. Mira remembered sitting in math class when the Air Force officers came to tell her. She remembered not crying. Not screaming. Just sitting there, frozen, while her whole world ended. After that, she went to live with her grandfather, Colonel Miguel Castellanos, retired Air Force, 72 years old, living alone in Nevada near a tiny private airstrip. For 6 months, Mira didn't speak. She just sat in her grandfather's hangar, staring at his old Cessna 172. Then one morning, she walked out to where he was working on the engine and said 5 words, "Teach me how to fly." Her grandfather looked at her. "Mira, you're 12. You can't legally." "I don't care about legal," she interrupted. "I need to fly. I need to feel close to them. Please, Grandpa. Please." Something in her voice broke him. He made a decision that would break every aviation rule in existence. "Okay. But we do this right. No shortcuts. I teach you everything: theory, mechanics, weather, navigation, emergencies. Everything your parents would have taught you. Deal?" Deal. For 4 years, Mira lived 2 lives. At school, she was the quiet girl with no friends. The one who ate lunch alone reading aviation textbooks. The one teachers worried about because she seemed too serious, too sad, too alone. At home, she was a pilot. Every afternoon after school, ground school with her grandfather. Aerodynamics. Meteorology. Aircraft systems. Emergency procedures. Every weekend, flying. That little airstrip was private, rarely used. Her grandfather would sit in the instructor's seat while Mira, feet barely reaching the rudder pedals, sitting on cushions to see over the instrument panel, flew that Cessna like she'd been born in the sky. By 14, she could land smoother than pilots with 500 hours. By 15, she'd practiced so many emergency procedures she could handle engine failures without breaking a sweat. By 16, she'd logged over 400 hours, all illegal, all secret, all taught by a grandfather who knew he could go to prison but didn't care because flying was the only thing keeping his granddaughter alive. Nobody knew. Not her teachers. Not her classmates. Nobody. If anyone found out, her grandfather would lose everything. She'd be taken away from him. The secret had to stay buried. This trip to Dubai was a school thing, a cultural exchange program. 2 weeks of museums and tourist sites with kids who didn't understand her. Mira hated every second. She spent the whole time wishing she was back home, back in the Cessna, back in the sky. Now she was on Emirates Flight 203, heading home to Los Angeles. 11 hours. She'd sleep, maybe read, then land and go straight to the hangar. Her grandfather promised they'd fly this weekend. Just 11 hours. Simple. Except nothing was going to be simple. The flight attendant's voice came over the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. You're now free to move about the cabin." Mira pulled out her phone and put in her earbuds. Music helped. It kept her from thinking too much. She closed her eyes. She didn't know that in exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, her entire life would change. She didn't know that 275 people were about to depend on her illegal 400 hours. She didn't know that the skills her dead parents taught her, the skills her grandfather refined, were about to be the only thing standing between survival and disaster. For now, she just sat in 27F, eyes closed, listening to music, trying not to cry on the anniversary of the worst day of her life. 4 hours into the flight, Mira was half asleep. She'd taken out her earbuds. The cabin was dark. Most passengers were sleeping. The flight attendants had dimmed the lights. Everything was calm, peaceful, normal. Then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Bang. Loud. Sharp. Like a gunshot. Myra's eyes snapped open. For 1 second, everything was silent. Then came the roar. A massive, screaming rush of air, like standing next to a jet engine. The aircraft shuddered violently. The cabin pressure changed so fast Myra's ears popped painfully. Whoosh. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. All around her, passengers started screaming. "Oh God! What's happening? We're crashing." Myra's training took over before her brain caught up. Mask on first. Secure your own oxygen before helping others. She grabbed the yellow mask above her seat and yanked it down over her face. The elastic strap pulled tight. She breathed in, oxygen flowing, clean and cold. Her hands weren't shaking. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. That was decompression, she thought. Rapid decompression. Something failed. A door seal, a window, a structural weakness. We just lost cabin pressure at 38,000 feet. She looked around. The businessman in 27E had his mask on, eyes wide with terror. The elderly woman in 27G was fumbling with hers, hands shaking so badly she couldn't get the elastic over her head. Mira reached over and helped her. "Here, like this. Breathe normally. Don't panic." The woman's terrified eyes locked on Myra's calm ones. "Are we going to die?" the woman whispered. "No," Mira said. She didn't know if that was true, but she said it anyway. "The pilots know what to do. We're going to be okay." But even as she said it, something felt wrong. The aircraft was descending. She could feel it, that sinking sensation in her stomach, like going down a roller coaster. The pilots were bringing them down to a safer altitude where people could breathe without oxygen masks. That was normal procedure. But something about this descent felt wrong. Too fast. Too steep. And the aircraft was tilting. Mira looked out the window. The wing was dipping. The horizon, barely visible in the darkness, was at an angle. "We're in a spiral," she realized. A descending spiral. That wasn't normal. That wasn't a controlled emergency descent. That was loss of control. Her blood went cold. The pilots should have this under control. Why don't they have this under control? Around her, passengers were crying, praying, holding each other. Flight attendants were moving through the aisles, trying to calm people down, checking that everyone had their masks on properly. One flight attendant, a young woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said, Amira, stopped at Myra's row. "Everyone okay here?" "We're okay," Mira said. Amira nodded and kept moving. But Mira could see the fear in her face. Flight attendants were trained to stay calm during emergencies. This one looked terrified. Something's wrong in the cockpit, Mira thought. Something's really wrong. 2 minutes passed. 3. The descent continued. The spiral was getting tighter. Then a voice came over the intercom, shaking, barely controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the senior flight attendant. We have an emergency situation. If there are any pilots on board this aircraft, any licensed pilots, please identify yourself to the cabin crew immediately. We need your assistance in the cockpit. Please, if you are a pilot, make yourself known now." The cabin went dead silent except for the roar of wind and the crying of children. Myra's heart stopped. Both pilots down, she thought. That's the only reason they'd ask for passenger pilots. Both pilots are incapacitated. She sat frozen. Around her, passengers were looking at each other, waiting for someone to stand up. Nobody stood. 5 seconds. 10. The flight attendant's voice came back, more desperate now. "Please, if anyone on board has any flight experience, any training at all, we need you in the cockpit right now." Still nobody moved. Myra's hands gripped her armrests. "You're not qualified," a voice in her head screamed. "You're 16. You've flown a Cessna, not a Boeing 777. You don't have a license. You're not legal." But another voice, her father's voice, cut through the fear. "Aircraft is aircraft, Mira. The size doesn't matter. Physics is physics. Controls are controls. But I've never flown anything this big. And 275 people are about to die if nobody does anything." Mira looked out the window again. The spiral was tightening. The descent rate was increasing. She did the math in her head. At this rate, they had maybe 5 minutes before they hit a critical altitude. Maybe less. Nobody was standing up. Nobody was going to the cockpit. She was the only one. "I'm not qualified," she thought desperately. "But I'm all they've got." Mira unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. The businessman in 27E grabbed her arm. "Kid, sit down. You need to keep your seatbelt on." Mira pulled free. "I need to get to the cockpit." "What? Why?" She didn't answer. She just started moving forward, oxygen mask still on, walking against the angle of the tilting aircraft. A flight attendant, a tall man with short hair and a name tag that said Marcus, tried to stop her. "Miss, please return to your seat." "I'm a pilot," Mira said. Marcus stared at her. "You're a child." "I'm a pilot. I have 400 hours of flight time. I can fly. Take me to the cockpit." 400, do you have a license? Are you commercially rated?" "No," Mira said honestly. "But I know how to fly. And if you don't take me to that cockpit right now, everyone on this plane is going to die. Your choice." Marcus hesitated. He looked at this small 16-year-old girl in an oversized hoodie and beat-up sneakers. Then he looked at the angle of the cabin floor. The spiral. The descent. "Follow me," he said. Marcus ran toward the front of the aircraft. Mira followed, her heart hammering. Other flight attendants stared as they passed. "Marcus, what are you doing?" "She says she's a pilot," Marcus called back. "She's a teenager. She's all we've got." They reached the cockpit door. Marcus grabbed the phone on the wall. I'm opening the door. I have someone who says she can fly. He punched in the code. The door unlocked with a click. Marcus pulled it open. Mira stepped inside and her breath caught. Both pilots were slumped over in their seats. The captain, a man in his 50s with gray hair, was unconscious, his face blue. Hypoxia. Lack of oxygen. The first officer was breathing but not responsive, head lolled to one side. The instrument panels were lit up like a Christmas tree, red lights, yellow lights, alarms beeping and chiming. The aircraft was at 28,000 feet and descending fast. The autopilot was disconnected. Nobody was flying the plane. For one terrible second, Mira couldn't move. The cockpit was huge, so much bigger than the Cessna. Screens everywhere. Buttons and switches covering every surface. It was overwhelming. Then her training kicked in. Don't think about what you don't know, her grandfather's voice said in her head. Focus on what you do know. Flying is flying. Get them out of their seats, Mira said, her voice steady and clear. I'm taking over. Marcus and Amira, who'd followed them, stared at her. You're 16 years old, Marcus said. You can't. I'm a pilot, Mira interrupted. And I'm the only person on this aircraft who can stop us from crashing. Now move them. Something in her voice, the absolute authority, made them obey. They unbuckled the captain and dragged him out of the seat. Then the first officer. Mira slid into the captain's seat. It was too big. She was too small. Her feet barely reached the rudder pedals. She yanked the seat forward as far as it would go and adjusted the height. Better. Not perfect, but better. She fastened her harness with shaking fingers. Okay, she thought. Okay. You can do this. First priority, stop the descent. She grabbed the control yoke, it was heavier than the Cessna's, more resistant, and pulled back gently. The massive aircraft responded. Slow. Heavy. But it responded. The nose came up. The descent rate decreased. Second priority, level the wings. She used the ailerons and rudder to stop the spiral. The horizon, visible now on the artificial horizon instrument, began to straighten. The aircraft leveled out. Myra's hands were shaking but she kept them on the controls. Third priority, establish communications. She found the radio panel. It looked different from the Cessna's but the principle was the same. She keyed the mic. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. This is Emirates Flight 203. Both pilots are incapacitated. I have assumed control of the aircraft. I need immediate assistance. There was a pause. Then a shocked voice came through the headset, Emirates 203, this is Mumbai Center. Say again, who is speaking? Mira took a breath. Mumbai Center, my name is Mira Castellanos. I'm 16 years old. I'm a passenger. Both cockpit crew are unconscious, I think from hypoxia during the decompression. The aircraft was in an uncontrolled descent. I've stabilized it but I need help. The silence on the other end lasted forever. Then, Emirates 203. Did you say you're 16 years old? Yes. I have flight training, 400 hours in a Cessna 172. I know how to fly but I've never flown a jet. I've never flown anything this big. I need someone to talk me through landing this plane. Another pause. Mira, the controller's voice was careful now, like he was talking to someone standing on a ledge. Are you saying a 16-year-old passenger is currently flying the aircraft? Yes. I'm the only one who can. Please, I have 275 people on board. I need help. Okay. Okay, Mira. Stay calm. We're going to help you. What's your current altitude? Mira scanned the instruments. 26,000 feet. I've stopped the descent at 26,000. Good. That's good. What's your heading? Mira found a compass heading. 270. West. Okay. Mira, I need you to hold that altitude and heading. Can you do that? Yes. I have the controls. I can hold it. Perfect. Don't touch anything else. Just fly straight and level. We're getting you help right now. You're doing great. Myra's eyes burned with tears, but she blinked them away. Thank you. Behind her, Marcus was on the phone with the cabin. We have someone flying the plane. Yes, a passenger. No, listen, she's actually doing it. We're level. We're stable. Just keep everyone calm. Amira knelt beside Myra's seat. What can I do to help? Watch the pilots, Mira said, not taking her eyes off the instruments. If either of them wakes up, we need them back in these seats immediately. Okay. Okay. Amira's voice was shaking, but she nodded. Mira kept flying. Straight and level. That was all she had to do right now. Just fly straight and level and wait for help. Her hands were locked on the yoke. Her feet pressed the rudder pedals. Her eyes scanned the instruments the way her grandfather taught her: airspeed, altitude, heading, artificial horizon, vertical speed. Everything looked stable. But she knew this was just the beginning. The hard part, the landing, was still coming. 12 minutes after Mira took control, the radio crackled again. Emirates 203, Mumbai Center. We have an Airbus A380 instructor pilot standing by. His name is Captain James Morrison. He's going to talk you through everything. I'm patching him through now. Thank you, Mira said. A new voice came through, older, calm, professional. Mira, this is Captain Morrison. I've been flying the A380 for 15 years. I'm going to be with you every step of the way. First question, how are you doing? I'm okay. I'm holding altitude at 26,000 feet, heading 270, airspeed is. She checked, 480 knots. That's perfect. You're doing exactly right. Now, I need you to tell me, how much flight experience do you actually have? Mira swallowed. 400 hours in a Cessna 172. My grandfather taught me. He's a retired Air Force colonel. I've been flying with him since I was 12. 400 hours, Morrison repeated. That's more than some people have when they get their commercial license. And you stabilized this aircraft on your own? Yes, sir. That's remarkable. Truly. Now, Mira, I'm not going to lie to you, landing an A380 is complicated. But here's the truth, you've already done the hardest part. You took control in an emergency, you stopped the descent, you leveled the wings. That takes skill. That takes training. If you can do that, you can land this plane. I've never landed anything bigger than a Cessna, Mira said, her voice cracking. I know. But landing is landing. The principles are the same. And I'm going to walk you through every single step. You're not doing this alone. Understand? Yes, sir. Good. Now, let's talk about what happened. You said there was a decompression event. Yes. A loud bang, then a rush of air. Oxygen masks dropped. The pilots must have passed out from hypoxia before they could get their masks on. Okay. That makes sense. We're going to get medical personnel ready for them. In the meantime, you're in command of this aircraft. I need you to engage the autopilot so you can take a breath. Do you see the autopilot panel? Mira scanned the instrument panel. There were so many buttons. I'm not sure which. It's in the center console, between the two pilot seats. You'll see a button labeled AP1 or Autopilot 1. Mira found it. I see it. Press it. The autopilot will hold your current altitude and heading. It'll take the workload off you. Mira pressed the button. Immediately, she felt the controls stiffen slightly. The autopilot engaged. The aircraft continued flying straight and level, but now the computer was doing it instead of her. She let go of the yoke and her hands were shaking violently. Autopilot engaged, she said. Perfect. Now take a breath. You can relax for a minute. Mira breathed. In and out. Her heart was hammering so hard she could hear it. Mira, Morrison's voice was gentle now, I know you're scared. That's okay. But you need to know, you just saved 275 people. If you hadn't taken control when you did, this aircraft would have crashed into the ocean. You did that. A 16-year-old kid did that. Tears ran down Myra's face. I didn't know what else to do. You did exactly the right thing. Now we're going to finish this together. Behind Mira, Amira was crying too. Marcus had his hand over his mouth, staring at this tiny teenager who'd just saved everyone. The radio crackled again. Different voice, American accent, older, familiar. Echo, this is Grandpa. Do you copy? Myra's breath caught. Grandpa? Yeah, kiddo. It's me. The FAA called. They told me what you're doing. Mira, I am so proud of you. Grandpa, I'm so sorry, I broke our secret, everyone knows now. I don't care about the secret, her grandfather said, his voice thick. I care about you. And I care about those people you're protecting. Now listen to me. You've trained for this. Maybe not in a jet, but you've trained for emergencies. You know how to fly. You know how to handle pressure. You're Elena and David's daughter. You have their skill in your blood. I'm scared, Mira whispered. I know. But you're also the best student pilot I've ever trained. And I'm going to be right here with you until you land. You're not alone. Okay. That's my girl. Now let's bring those people home. For the next 30 minutes, Captain Morrison walked Mira through the aircraft systems. Fuel status, enough for 3 more hours. Hydraulics, all systems working. Engines, both running perfectly. Flight controls, responding normally. The only problem was the pilots, still unconscious, and the fact that a 16-year-old with 400 hours in a tiny Cessna was flying a massive jet. Okay, Mira, Morrison said. Here's the plan. We're diverting you to Mumbai. It's the closest major airport with runways long enough for an A380. That's about 90 minutes from your current position. We're going to descend slowly, configure the aircraft for landing, and I'm going to talk you through every step. Sound good? Yes, sir. First thing, we need to start descending. I'm going to teach you how to program the autopilot to bring us down slowly. Ready? For the next 20 minutes, Morrison taught Mira how to use the flight management system, the computer that controlled the autopilot. It was complicated. So many buttons and screens. But Morrison was patient, breaking everything down into simple steps. Find the altitude selector knob. It's marked Alt. Mira found it. Good. Now dial it down to 20,000 feet. She turned the knob. The number changed, 26,000. 25,000, 20,000. Now press the knob to confirm. She pressed it. Perfect. Now press the button marked V/S for vertical speed. She pressed it. You'll see a vertical speed selector. Set it to -1,000. She adjusted it. Now press to confirm. She did. The aircraft began a gentle descent. 1,000 feet per minute. Smooth. Controlled. You just programmed the autopilot, Morrison said. See? You're learning. Mira actually smiled. This is easier than I thought. Don't get cocky, her grandfather's voice cut in. Stay focused. Yes, sir. As they descended, Mumbai Center coordinated with airports across India. Emergency crews were mobilizing. Ambulances, fire trucks, medical teams, all getting ready for Emirates 203. The news was spreading across the world. A 16-year-old girl was flying a commercial jet after both pilots collapsed. Social media exploded. News channels interrupted their programming. People who'd never cared about aviation were suddenly glued to their screens, following the flight tracker showing Emirates 203's path toward Mumbai. But Mira didn't know any of that. She was too focused on flying. Every few minutes, Morrison would teach her something new. How to adjust the speed. How to change the heading. How to monitor the fuel. How to read the navigation display. And slowly, step by step, Mira stopped feeling overwhelmed. The cockpit stopped feeling alien. It was just another aircraft. Bigger, more complex, but still governed by the same physics she'd learned in the Cessna. Airspeed. Altitude. Attitude. The holy trinity of flying. Keep the airspeed steady. Keep the altitude where you want it. Keep the attitude, the angle of the aircraft, stable. Everything else was just details. At 15,000 feet, Morrison's voice took on a more serious tone. Okay, Mira. Now comes the hard part. We need to configure the aircraft for landing. That means extending the flaps and landing gear. It's going to feel different when we do this. The aircraft will slow down, the nose will drop slightly, you'll feel more drag. But that's normal. Don't panic. I won't, Mira said. I'm going to talk you through it step by step. Ready? Ready. Mumbai Airport was 90 miles away. Mira was at 10,000 feet, flying at 250 knots, the speed limit below 10,000 feet. The sun was rising. Through the cockpit windows, she could see the Indian coastline in the distance. Almost there. Mira, Morrison said, in about 10 minutes, we're going to start our approach. I'm going to teach you how to line up with the runway. But first, I need to know, how do you feel? Tired? Overwhelmed? I'm okay, Mira said. And she meant it. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. Her heart was still beating fast, but it was controlled fear now, not panic. Good. Because this next part requires precision. Landing an A380 isn't like landing a Cessna. The aircraft weighs 500,000 kilograms. It doesn't respond quickly. Every input you make takes time. You have to think ahead, anticipate. Understand? Yes, sir. And there's one more thing. When you flare, when you pull back on the yoke just before touchdown, you're going to be 50 feet off the ground. That's 5 stories. High. It's going to feel wrong. Your instinct will tell you you're too high. But you have to trust your instruments. Trust the approach. Can you do that? Mira thought about all the landings she'd practiced with her grandfather. The Cessna was tiny, she could practically touch the ground from the cockpit. This would be completely different. But the principle was the same. I can do it, she said. I know you can. Mumbai approach control came on the radio, Emirates 203, we have you on radar. Turn left heading 080. Descend and maintain 4,000 feet. You're cleared for ILS approach runway 27. Mira's grandfather cut in, Mira, ILS means Instrument Landing System. The autopilot can follow it automatically. Morrison will show you how. For the next 5 minutes, Morrison walked her through setting up the autopilot to follow the ILS, a radio beam that would guide the aircraft right to the runway. It was like flying on rails. The autopilot would follow the beam, descend at the correct rate, keep them lined up perfectly. All Mira had to do was monitor it. And when they got close to the ground, take over manually for the landing. Flaps to position 1, Morrison said. Mira found the flap lever and moved it. She felt the aircraft slow down, felt the nose drop slightly as drag increased. Flaps position 1, she confirmed. Good. Now we wait. The coastline was getting closer. She could see buildings now. The city of Mumbai spreading out below. At 3,000 feet, Morrison said, gear down. Mira found a landing gear lever, a big handle shaped like a wheel. She pulled it down. There was a loud whirring sound. The entire aircraft shook as 3 massive landing gear assemblies, each one bigger than a car, lowered into place. Red lights on the panel. Then green. 3 green lights, Mira said. Gear down and locked. Perfect. Flaps to position 2. She moved the flap lever again. More drag. More deceleration. At 2,000 feet, Morrison said, flaps to position 3. She moved the lever. The aircraft was slowing to approach speed now, about 150 knots. She could see the airport. Runways. Buildings. Emergency vehicles lining the taxiways, dozens of them, lights flashing. At 1,000 feet, Morrison said, okay, Mira. In 30 seconds, you're going to disconnect the autopilot and fly manually. I'll tell you exactly what to do. Are you ready? I'm ready. Remember, gentle inputs. The aircraft is heavy. Don't over-control. Small movements. Small movements. Got it. And Mira? You're about to do something incredible. Trust yourself. Mira's hands gripped the yoke. Disconnect autopilot now, Morrison said. She pressed the button. The yoke came alive in her hands, she could feel the aircraft, feel the air flowing over the wings, feel the massive weight wanting to sink toward the ground. I have the controls, she said. You have the controls, Morrison confirmed. Altitude 500 feet. Looking good. Keep the wings level. The runway was right in front of her. A long strip of concrete, getting bigger every second. 400 feet. Airspeed is good. Descent rate is good. Mira's hands were steady. 300 feet. Start reducing power. Pull the throttles back slowly. She found the throttle levers, 4 of them, 1 for each engine. She pulled them back gently. The engines quieted. The aircraft settled. 200 feet. You're doing perfect. Keep it coming. In the back of her mind, Mira heard her father's voice, landing is just controlled falling, Mira. You stop the fall right at the moment you touch down. 100 feet. Get ready to flare. When I say, pull back gently on the yoke. Not too much, just enough to raise the nose. Okay. 50 feet. Flare now. Pull back. Mira pulled back on the yoke. The nose came up. The descent slowed. 30 feet. Hold it. Hold it. The runway was right there. Racing toward her. 20 feet. Keep holding. Trust the instruments, Morrison had said. Don't look at the ground. 10 feet. The main landing gear touched the runway. Thump. Not smooth. Not perfect. But solid. Safe. The massive aircraft settled onto its wheels. Mira pushed the nose down gently and the nose gear touched. Thrust reversers, Morrison said. Mira found the levers and pulled them up. The engines roared as they redirected their thrust forward, slowing the aircraft. Brakes, her grandfather said. Easy on the brakes. She pressed the pedals at the top of the rudder controls. The aircraft slowed. 500 knots. 400, 300. 200, 100. Slower. Slower. The aircraft rolled down the runway, shedding speed, until finally it stopped. For a moment, Mira just sat there, hands still on the controls, breathing hard. Then the radio exploded with voices. Emirates 203, you are safely on the ground. Repeat, you are on the ground. Mira, you did it. You did it. Unbelievable, she actually landed it. Behind her, Marcus and Amira were crying, hugging each other. In the cabin, passengers were cheering, screaming with relief. On the ground, emergency crews were surrounding the aircraft. And in her headset, Mira heard her grandfather's voice, thick with emotion, "That's my girl. That's my Echo. Your parents would be so proud." Mira finally let go of the controls. Her hands were shaking. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. 275 people. All alive. All safe. Because of her. Mira sat in the cockpit, too exhausted to move. Outside, emergency crews were positioning stairs against the aircraft doors. Paramedics were boarding to check on the pilots. Marcus put his hand on her shoulder. "Mira. You need to come with us. The authorities want to talk to you." She nodded numbly. Her legs were shaking when she stood. She'd been sitting in that seat for almost 2 hours, hands locked on the controls, every muscle tense. Amira helped her to the door. When Mira stepped out of the cockpit, the entire cabin erupted. Passengers were standing, clapping, crying. Some were trying to reach her, hands outstretched. "You saved us. Thank you. You're a hero." A little boy, maybe 7 years old, ran up to her. His mother tried to stop him but he broke free. He looked up at Mira with huge eyes. "Are you really 16? Mira nodded. "You're my hero," he said. Something inside Mira broke. She knelt down and hugged the boy, and suddenly she was crying, huge, gasping sobs that she'd been holding back for 2 hours. The boy's mother knelt beside them, crying too. "You saved my son. You saved my baby. How can I ever thank you?" Mira couldn't speak. She just shook her head. An elderly man, the one from first class, made his way down the aisle. He had tears streaming down his face. "My grandchildren are on this plane. 3 and 5 years old. You gave them their lives back. You're an angel." "I'm not an angel," Mira whispered. I'm just a girl who knows how to fly." Marcus gently pulled her up. "We need to go, Mira." "I'm sorry." They led her down the stairs. The moment her feet touched the ground, she was surrounded. Airport officials. Indian aviation authorities. Emirates Airlines executives. Police. Paramedics. And cameras. So many cameras. News crews had arrived. Photographers were shouting her name. "Mira. Mira, look here. How does it feel to save 275 lives? Were you scared?" A woman in a crisp uniform stepped forward, badge identified her as Director of Mumbai Airport Authority. "Miss Castellanos, I'm Director Patel. We need to ask you some questions. Please come with me." They took her to an office inside the terminal. For the next hour, Mira answered questions. Yes, she'd taken control of the aircraft. Yes, she knew it was illegal for her to fly without a license. Yes, her grandfather had been teaching her. No, she'd never intended to break any laws, she just didn't want people to die. Director Patel looked at her with an expression Mira couldn't read. "Miss Castellanos, do you understand that what you did, flying without a license, is a serious violation of international aviation law?" "Yes, ma'am." "Do you understand that your grandfather could face criminal charges for teaching you?" Myra's voice cracked. Please don't arrest him. It's my fault. I begged him to teach me. He only did it because I was broken after my parents died. Flying was the only thing that kept me alive. Please. Director Patel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something Mira didn't expect. You saved 275 lives today. Including my nephew and his wife. They were in row 34. Mira looked up. Legally, you broke many rules, Patel continued. But morally? You did what no one else could. You stepped forward when everyone else was too afraid. That takes courage most adults don't have. What's going to happen to me? Mira asked quietly. I don't know yet. That's above my authority. But I want you to know, what you did today will never be forgotten. By the time Mira left the office, the story had gone global. Teen girl lands passenger jet after pilot's collapse. 16-year-old saves 275 lives in miracle landing. Secret pilot, teenager's illegal training saves flight. Social media exploded. The video of Mira stepping off the aircraft, small, exhausted, overwhelmed, went viral. Millions of views in hours. People were calling her a hero. Others were calling it irresponsible that she'd been allowed to fly. The debate raged across news channels, radio shows, internet forums. But Mira didn't see any of it. She was in a hotel room provided by Emirates, sitting on the bed, staring at her phone. She had 17 missed calls from her grandfather. She called him back. He answered on the first ring. Mira. Hi, Grandpa. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then her grandfather said, his voice breaking, I watched the whole thing. They streamed the radar track live. I watched you descend. I watched you land. Mira, I have never been more terrified or more proud in my entire life. I'm sorry I broke our secret. Don't apologize. Not for this. Never for this. Are you going to get in trouble? Her grandfather was quiet. Probably. The FAA is investigating. But Mira, I don't care. You're alive. Those 275 people are alive. That's all that matters. I don't know what happens now, Mira whispered. Neither do I, kiddo. But we'll figure it out together. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the flight in her head. The decompression. The descent. The landing. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. But the cost was heavy. Her secret was out. Her grandfather might go to prison. She might never be allowed to fly again. Was it worth it? She looked at the 2 dog tags around her neck, her parents' tags, the ones she wore every day. Captain Elena Castellanos. Major David Castellanos. What would you tell me? She thought. Was I right to do it? She imagined her mother's voice, you saved lives, Mira. That's what pilots do. We protect people. And her father's voice, you made us proud, Echo. So damn proud. Mira closed her eyes and finally slept. 3 days later, Mira was still in Mumbai. The pilots had recovered. Captain Rahman and First Officer Chen both suffered from severe hypoxia but made full recoveries. When they learned what Mira had done, they both asked to meet her. She sat in a hospital room with Captain Rahman, a kind-faced man in his 50s. I should be thanking you, he said. You saved my life. You saved everyone. I just did what I had to do, Mira said. Most people freeze in emergencies. You acted. That's the mark of a real pilot. He paused. I heard about your parents. Test pilots, both of them. Mira nodded. They would be proud of you. I hope so. Meanwhile, investigations were happening on 3 continents. The Indian DGCA, Directorate General of Civil Aviation, was investigating the incident. The FAA in America was investigating Mira and her grandfather. Emirates Airlines was conducting their own review. And the media was still following every development. A week after the landing, the FAA released a statement. Regarding the incident involving minor Mira Castellanos and Colonel Miguel Castellanos, RET, after thorough investigation, we find that Colonel Castellanos did violate federal aviation regulations by instructing an unlicensed minor. However, given the extraordinary circumstances, that this training directly resulted in saving 275 lives, we are issuing a formal reprimand but no criminal charges. Additionally, we are creating a special pathway for Ms. Castellanos to obtain her private pilot license immediately upon turning 17, followed by an accelerated path to commercial certification. Mira read the statement 3 times, unable to believe it. No charges. Her grandfather was safe. And she could get her license legally. The Indian DGCA issued their own statement, praising Mira's actions and officially commending her for extraordinary airmanship under impossible circumstances. Emirates Airlines offered her free flights for life. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. The families of the 275 passengers started a petition. They raised money, over $100,000, for Mira's future flight training. They wrote letters thanking her. They sent photos of their children, their parents, their loved ones who'd been on that flight. One letter, from the elderly woman who'd sat in 27G, said simply, "Dear Mira, you helped me with my oxygen mask when everyone else was panicking. You were calm when I was terrified. Then you saved my life and 274 others. I'm 73 years old. I've lived a long time. But because of you, I get to live longer. I get to see my grandchildren grow up. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You're an angel." Mira kept that letter. She kept all of them. 2 weeks after the incident, Mira finally flew home to Los Angeles. She was on a commercial flight, as a passenger this time, and the entire crew knew who she was. The captain invited her to visit the cockpit before takeoff. "It's an honor to have you aboard," he said, shaking her hand. "What you did was incredible." Mira looked at the cockpit, so similar to the one she'd sat in during the emergency. "I was terrified the whole time." "That's what courage is," the captain said. "Being terrified and doing it anyway." When she landed in Los Angeles, her grandfather was waiting. The moment she saw him, she ran. He caught her in a huge hug and they both cried. "I'm so glad you're home," he whispered. "Me too, Grandpa." "Me too." They drove back to Nevada together, to his small house near the private airstrip. The Cessna 172 was sitting in the hangar, waiting. Mira walked up to it and put her hand on the propeller. This little plane, the one that had started everything. "Want to go up?" her grandfather asked. Mira turned to him. "Can we? The FAA gave you provisional permission to fly with me until you get your official license. So yeah. We can fly." They did the pre-flight check together, just like they'd done hundreds of times. Then they climbed in, her grandfather in the instructor seat, Mira in the pilot seat. She went through the startup checklist. Engine start. Radio check. Taxi clearance. They rolled down the little runway and lifted off into the Nevada sky. For the first time in weeks, Mira felt peace. Up here, above the world, everything made sense. Her grandfather watched her fly. "You're different now," he said quietly. "How?" "You're not Echo anymore. You're not just an echo of your parents. You're Mira. Your own pilot. Your own person." Mira thought about that. He was right. Something had changed during that emergency. She'd stopped flying to feel close to ghosts. She'd started flying because it was who she was. "I think Mom and Dad would be okay with that," she said. "I think they'd be proud." They flew for an hour, practicing maneuvers, just enjoying the sky. When they landed, Mira felt lighter than she had in years. Mira Castellanos stood outside the FAA testing center in Las Vegas. She was 17 years old now. Old enough to legally hold a pilot license. Today was her commercial pilot check ride, the final test. She'd spent the last year studying, training, preparing. She'd passed her private pilot license test on her 17th birthday. Then she'd worked toward her instrument rating. Then her commercial rating. The youngest person to ever attempt the commercial check ride. Her grandfather stood beside her. Nervous? Terrified, Mira admitted. You've done this before. You landed an A380. This is nothing. That was different. That was survival. This is real. This is real too. And you're ready. The examiner, a serious-looking man named Mr. Patterson, called her in. For the next 4 hours, he tested her on everything. Oral exam, regulations, weather theory, aircraft systems, emergency procedures. Flight test, takeoffs, landings, steep turns, stalls, emergency scenarios. Mira performed flawlessly. When they landed and shut down the engine, Mr. Patterson looked at her for a long moment. Miss Castellanos, he said. I've been an examiner for 23 years. I've tested hundreds of pilots. You are, without question, one of the most naturally skilled pilots I've ever seen. Mira's heart pounded. You pass. Congratulations. You're now a commercially licensed pilot. Mira couldn't speak. She just nodded. Mr. Patterson handed her the temporary certificate. Your permanent license will arrive in a few weeks. But this makes it official. You're a commercial pilot. When she walked out, her grandfather was waiting. She held up the certificate. He grinned, the biggest smile she'd seen from him in years. That's my girl. They drove home together. That evening, Mira stood in the hangar, looking at the Cessna. She thought about everything that had led to this moment. Her parents' deaths. The grief that nearly destroyed her. Her grandfather's decision to teach her. 400 illegal hours. The emergency over the Indian Ocean. The landing that saved 275 lives. All of it had led here. She touched the dog tags around her neck. I did it, she whispered. I'm a pilot now. A real pilot. Just like you. She could almost hear her mother's voice, we always knew you would be. And her father's voice, that's our Echo. Flying free. But she wasn't Echo anymore. She was Mira. And she was exactly where she was meant to be. 6 months after getting her commercial license, Mira received a letter. It was from Emirates Airlines. Dear Miss Castellanos. We would like to invite you to join our cadet pilot program. While you are still too young for commercial airline operations, we would like to sponsor your training toward an airline transport pilot license. When you turn 21, we would be honored to have you join Emirates as a first officer. Additionally, we would like to invite you to speak at our annual safety conference, sharing your experience with pilots from around the world. You saved 275 lives, including many of our passengers and crew. We would like to help you build a career doing what you do best, flying and protecting people. Sincerely, Emirates Airlines Training Division. Mira read the letter 3 times. They wanted her. A real airline wanted her. What do you think? She asked her grandfather. He smiled. I think your parents would tell you to reach for the sky. That's a terrible pun, Grandpa. I know. But it's true. Mira made her decision. She accepted. Over the next 3 years, she trained harder than anyone in the program. She studied aircraft systems, practiced in simulators, learned everything about commercial aviation. And when she turned 21, she walked into Emirates headquarters wearing a pilot's uniform. Her name tag read, F/OM, Castellanos. First Officer Mira Castellanos. The youngest pilot in Emirates history. On her first day, she was assigned to fly a route from Dubai to Los Angeles. The same route. The same aircraft type. When she entered the cockpit for her pre-flight check, the captain, a veteran pilot named Sarah Chen, smiled at her. "I know who you are," Chen said. "Everyone knows who you are. The girl who saved Flight 203. "That was a long time ago," Mira said. "For years. But people don't forget. I was in the training center when it happened. We all watched the radar track. What you did was impossible. It didn't feel impossible. It just felt necessary." Chen nodded. "That's what makes a good pilot. Doing what's necessary, even when it seems impossible." They completed their pre-flight. Passengers boarded. The flight attendants closed the doors. Mira sat in the first officer's seat, the right seat, where she belonged now. She looked at the instrument panel. So familiar now. She'd spent hundreds of hours in simulators, learning every system, every procedure. Captain Chen started the engines. As they taxied toward the runway, Mira looked out the window at the Dubai sky. For years ago, she'd been a passenger on this route. A terrified 16-year-old carrying the weight of her parents' deaths. Now she was a pilot. A real pilot. Living the dream her parents had dreamed for her. "Emirates 204, you're cleared for takeoff," the tower said. Chen looked at Mira. "Ready?" "Ready," Mira said. They accelerated down the runway. The aircraft lifted off smoothly, climbing into the night sky. Mira watched the lights of Dubai fall away below. She thought about her parents. Captain Elena Castellanos. Major David Castellanos. The two people who taught her to love flying before she could even read. They were gone. But they were also here, in every control input she made, every decision, every moment in the air. "You okay?" Chen asked, noticing Mira's expression. Mira smiled. "Yeah. I'm okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. In a cockpit. In the sky." Epilogue, the speech. 2 years later, Mira stood at a podium in front of 3,000 pilots. She was 23 years old. A full captain now, the youngest in Emirates history. The Aviation Safety Conference was the biggest in the world. Pilots from every continent. Legends of aviation. Test pilots, airline captains, military aviators. And Mira Castellanos, invited to give the keynote speech. She looked out at the sea of faces. 6 years ago, she began. "I was 16 years old, sitting in seat 27F on a flight from Dubai to Los Angeles. I was just a passenger. A kid with a secret. I'd been flying illegally with my grandfather for 4 years, trying to stay close to my parents who died in a crash." The audience was silent. Then something went wrong. Decompression at 38,000 feet. Both pilots unconscious. The aircraft spiraling out of control. And I had to make a choice: stay quiet and let everyone die, or break every rule and try to save them. She paused. I chose to break the rules. I walked to that cockpit. I took control of an aircraft I'd never flown before. And with help from people on the ground, Captain Morrison, Mumbai Center, and my grandfather, I landed that plane. She touched the dog tags around her neck. She still wore them, every day. People call me a hero. But I'm not. I'm just a pilot who did what pilots do: protect the people who trust us with their lives. My parents taught me that. My grandfather taught me that. And Flight 203 proved it to me." She looked directly at the audience. "I'm standing here today because I broke rules. I flew without a license. I violated regulations. And because of that, 275 people lived. Does that make the rules wrong? No. Rules exist for good reasons. They keep people safe. But sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, the right thing to do is break them. She saw some people nodding. I learned something that day. Age doesn't define ability. A license doesn't define skill. What defines a pilot is what you do when everything goes wrong. When the choice is between following the rules and saving lives, you save lives. She smiled. My parents were test pilots. They spent their lives pushing boundaries, testing limits, proving what was possible. They died doing what they loved. And they taught me to love it too. Every time I fly, I carry them with me. I carry the 275 people from Flight 203. I carry the responsibility of this uniform. She gestured to her captain's uniform. 6 years ago, I was a scared kid with 400 illegal hours and a secret. Today, I'm a captain with over 2,000 hours and a promise, to fly with skill, integrity, and courage. To protect every single person who boards my aircraft. To honor my parents' legacy and the trust that 275 people placed in me. She paused. That's what being a pilot means. Not the license. Not the uniform. The responsibility. The commitment. The willingness to act when action is needed. She stepped back from the podium. The room erupted in applause. 3,000 pilots, some of the best in the world, standing and clapping for a 23-year-old who'd once been the 16-year-old in seat 27F. After the speech, dozens of people wanted to talk to her. Young pilots asking for advice. Veteran captains sharing their own stories. Instructors thanking her for inspiring their students. But the person Mira wanted to see most was standing in the back. Her grandfather. Colonel Miguel Castellanos. 78 years old now, but still flying. She made her way through the crowd to him. Well, she asked. How'd I do? He hugged her tight. Your parents would be so proud, Mira. So incredibly proud. I couldn't have done any of it without you, Grandpa. You risked everything to teach me. And I'd do it again. Every single time. They stood there together, the retired colonel and the young captain, the grandfather and granddaughter who'd broken every rule and saved 275 lives. Want to get out of here? Mira asked. Go fly somewhere. Her grandfather grinned. Always. That evening, they flew together one more time. Not in a commercial jet or a simulator. In the old Cessna 172, the plane where it all started. Mira sat in the left seat. Her grandfather in the right. They lifted off into the Nevada sunset, the sky painted gold and orange and red. As they climbed, Mira felt complete peace. She'd lost her parents. Found herself in grief. Learned to fly as a way to survive. Saved 275 lives when no one else could. Built a career from impossible circumstances. And through it all, she'd learned the most important lesson. Flying wasn't about the aircraft or the license or the hours logged. It was about purpose. Responsibility. The commitment to protect and serve. It was about being worthy of the trust people placed in you when they boarded your aircraft. What are you thinking about? Her grandfather asked. Mira smiled. I'm thinking about Mom and Dad. I'm thinking they'd be happy I found my own way. They would be. They are. You really think so? I know so. You're not their echo anymore, Mira. You're your own pilot. Your own person. And you're exactly who you were meant to be. Mira looked out at the endless sky. She thought about the 16-year-old girl in seat 27F, scared, grieving, alone. She thought about the moment she stood up and walked to that cockpit. She thought about every landing since then, every flight, every choice that led to this moment. I'm glad I broke the rules, Grandpa, she said quietly. So am I, kiddo. So am I. They flew until the stars came out. And in that small Cessna, high above the Nevada desert, Captain Mira Castellanos felt her parents' presence one last time, not as ghosts, not as memories, but as the foundation of everything she'd become. She was their daughter. She was her grandfather's student. She was the girl who saved 275 lives. But most importantly, she was a pilot. And she was flying free. In memory of all pilots who faced the impossible and found a way through. To the students who learned in unconventional ways. To the people who break rules for the right reasons. And to anyone who's ever looked at the sky and felt called home.